What are some things you think of when you hear the name Kevin Durant?
Soft. Overrated. Pretty boy.
What if I told you Kevin Durant could have been the greatest basketball player of all time? A 7-footer with guard-like skills that can pull it from anywhere and is a good defender? That's a recipe for greatness. Okay, so as everyone in the basketball or sports world in general knows, Kevin Durant is good. Like, really good. However, recently, he asked why he can't be in the discussion for being the greatest basketball player of all time. And for obvious reasons, he is not in that discussion. And because I don't feel like adding on to the dogpiling that's been happening to Kevin Durant after these comments, I'm going to do something that I find more interesting and explore 3 ways Kevin Durant could have been the greatest player of all time.
With the second pick in the 2007 NBA Draft, the Seattle Supersonics select Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant was drafted by the Seattle Supersonics in 2008, and for this first scenario, I want to talk about how he realistically could have become a player in the GOAT discussion in Oklahoma City, where the franchise shortly relocated after Durant's rookie season because, frankly, he had all the tools. For those of you who weren't around back when KD was drafted, the best way to describe him as a prospect is Wemby before Wemby. Having come off one of, if not the greatest freshman season in college basketball history, having averaged 26 and 11 as a Texas Longhorn, with the playstyle that he had was unheard of. He was truly a unicorn before the term became more popular. I know we see 7-footers like Chet and Wemby and all these 6'10 plus players handling the ball and shooting from deep nowadays, but when Durant was drafted, it was almost unbelievable. Someone of that length and stature
Who can pull up from 30?
as the great Stephen A. Smith would say. So the physical tools and skill set were definitely there for him to make a run at the title of greatest of all time. So we know the talent and ability were there, and with that, it did not take the Slim Reaper long to translate to the NBA. As in Durant's rookie year, he averaged 20 points a game, and by the time he was in his 3rd year, he was crowned as the youngest scoring champion in league history, averaging a whopping 30.1 points per game on impressive shooting splits at just 21 years old of 48, 37, and 90% from the free throw line. He would rack up 3 of the next 4 scoring titles after this as well. So, okay, the talent and the numbers were there, but we've seen plenty of talented guys fill up the stat sheet, but we all know there's another very important factor that goes into the GOAT discussion, more so than any other discussion. That factor is winning, and in order to win, you have to have a good team surrounding you so you can contend, and that's where this video really gets rolling, as Durant had a great supporting cast around him in OKC when he was young. Obviously, he infamously played with 2 other future MVPs in James Harden and Russell Westbrook, up through 2012 and 2016 respectively, but he also played with other young talented players such as Serge Ibaka and Jeff Green, and that's really just scratching the surface of how good these OKC rosters actually were. And everything seemed to be going great as Durant made it to his first NBA Finals ever in 2012, where they lost to the recently formed Big Three in Miami in a series that was a lot closer than most people seem to remember. Games 2 through 4 of the 5-game series were all decided by 6 or less points, but the gentleman's sweep seems to make people forget that. So, what happened? Well,
did this surprise you, or did the people in the inner circles of the NBA see this coming?
To the front of the rim, pick up that garbage.
42-41 in Westbrook, hobbling away. Thompson and Curry. Here is Thompson.
Third. But Durant his first. Like he just is not comfortable.
Thompson, and he pulls it back. Thompson wide open for 3-point line. Here is Thompson has been on.
goes down. Mark.
All right, here is Thompson. Here's Thompson who just checked back in and knocked. Thompson alive for the new possession. Thompson turning and shooting.
And knock it down.
A long 3 for Bella. Thompson fires for 3. Yes! Golden State by 3.
But what if that never happened? Let's say everything else in Durant's career happened exactly the way it did through the 2012 NBA Finals and the Harden trade. So now we just have Durant, Russ, and company. If you weren't there or just don't remember, Russ and KD at age 25 were dominant. This Thunder team captured the 1 seed with 60 wins in the mean Western Conference, and this was back when you had to go a good bit over 500 to even sniff the playoffs. So they entered the playoffs playing against former teammate James Harden and the Houston Rockets, who were the 8 seed with 45 wins. But let's change something. What if this never happened? Let's say the Thunder stay fully healthy and as the 1 seed are able to make it to the NBA Finals where they stare down the team that had defeated them just 1 season prior. To be frank, this Thunder team was probably the best roster top to bottom they had in the Durant and Westbrook era. The duo was great themselves, and then they were surrounded by Thabo Sefolosha, who was a good 3-and-D guy that year, along with Kevin Martin, who was acquired for Harden. Those two, along with Ibaka rounding out the starting 5, gives me reason to believe that if Russ hadn't gone down with injury, they could have avenged their prior finals loss, and KD would now be tied with LeBron for titles, while 4 years younger, at 1 apiece. Then, if Russ isn't hurt, he doesn't have an injury-riddled year the next season, and for the sake of this video being how KD could have been the GOAT, let's just say he runs it back and has now won back-to-back championships versus LeBron James, along with winning MVP in the 2014 season. Because if the Spurs got their back-to-back years with the Thunder injuries, if the Thunder weren't injured and won in 2013, who's to say they wouldn't just run it back? These 2 rings help KD in 2 ways. It takes away LeBron's GOAT case while enhancing his. He never had to leave, and let's say him and Russ win another 2 championships in their tenure in OKC with minimal injury. Let's say they lose in 2015 due to KD's injury happening, but in 2016, instead of blowing a 3-1 lead then making the softest move in NBA history, they get the job done and go get one because they don't let it get to 6 games and Game 6 Clay doesn't happen. That's 3 rings, and I'd say it would have been safe to assume that in this scenario, he wins another. If Durant had 4 rings in the resume that he currently has, all while in a Thunder jersey, along with probably another MVP or 2 because he wasn't on the Warriors for the next few years, and we weren't going to give him MVP while he was on the Warriors, let's just be honest, which people still haven't forgiven him for the move, and I'm one of those people. I think, though, if that had happened, beyond a shadow of a doubt that if it weren't for injuries plaguing the Thunder from 2012 through 2015, we just might be having a conversation involving Kevin Durant when it comes to being the greatest player of all time.
How are you viewing this move from Durant?
Well, I'm viewing it as the weakest move I've ever seen from a superstar. Plain and simple. That's just how I look at it.
Now, for the second scenario, let's forget everything in that first scenario and just fast forward to the point in KD's career where he made a decision that would change the way NBA fans viewed him as a player forever. So, I know a lot of people are going to run to the comments and say there's no way KD could be in the conversation after going to Golden State. And while I think the rings while he was in Golden State are certainly worth less than others like Dirk in 2011 or almost any other title in NBA history, what if he had stayed and just kept winning? Now, mind you, I was 12 years old when he went to Golden State, but at the time this move happened, me, along with the entire NBA world, figured it was over and no one else was going to win a championship ever again until the Warriors' Big Four retired. So, what if that happened? He did have the Dagger 3 against the Cavs in the finals in 2017. He did have the Dagger 3 against the Cavs in the finals in 2018. So, let's say everything happens the same as in the real world up to Game 5 of the 2019 NBA Finals. What if KD didn't rupture his Achilles? The Warriors were down 3-1 in the series going into Game 5, so what if, instead of rupturing his Achilles, Durant was able to finish the series and lead them to a comeback? Yes, the comeback would have its detractors, including me, and I would probably be extremely upset about it, but nonetheless, that story is still insane. Coming back from an injury to save your team from a 3-1 deficit and capturing the first three-peat since Kobe and Shaq. I think if that team had the first 4-peat ever or went on to win 2 more after potentially losing 1 due to injuries with that Warriors team, we would at least be considering throwing Durant in the conversation with LeBron and MJ. Definitely if he had gotten to 5 rings in 6 years or 4-peated. It would be a debunkable argument, more than likely using the same argument used against LeBron about having to have a super team to win, but I think KD's GOAT case would age well over time if he hadn't gotten injured in the 2019 playoffs and the Warriors had continued their dominance. Truly, I think the main reason he left was because of the culmination of them losing that and him knowing that no one was going to respect his rings in Golden State unless it was something ridiculous like the aforementioned 4-peat or 5 rings in 6 years. But that's how I think he could have been the GOAT in Golden State. Lastly, we enter the most realistic way with almost everything happening the exact same, that KD could have been at least in the straw man's GOAT debate. You know, the one where someone tries to throw someone over LeBron for whatever reason, as if it's not a two-man race between MJ and Bron. So everything's happened the way it did. We don't respect KD's championships. He's recovering from an Achilles injury. And so he's going to Brooklyn to prove he can do it without Steph. And then immediately teams up with Kyrie and Harden. But that's not the point. To be honest, the Nets very well could have won a championship with that team, but literally missed their chance by a foot. Or a toe. Not to mention Kyrie going down with injury in Game 4. You can't convince me that if he had been healthy the rest of the series, that the Nets would not have won that and gone on to win the NBA Finals against the Suns. I honestly think that one finals run, showing he could do it without being on the Warriors, could have bolstered him into at least a conversation about his greatness and if he belongs in that discussion. Then if he had won another there, or let's say he still goes to the Suns and got a fourth there, or like they won this year, I think we'd have to have the discussion that he might be up there. But then there's now, post-Nets, Warriors, OKC, and him being one of the most hated players in NBA history for ruining basketball at what was its height. The 2015 through 16 NBA season was the greatest season in NBA history, and I don't think it's very close. It had everyone very optimistic about the future, and then Durant ruined it. Personally, I've always been a fan of Durant and his playstyle ever since I was little. However, I think now we can safely say he won't ever be close to the GOAT conversation, and it really stems from the Warriors stuff, and not seeming to be able to get one elsewhere. He'll always have that monkey on his back, and I think even if he somehow won a championship with the Suns in his last few years, it just wouldn't make up for everything else at this point. All in all, Kevin Durant, the Slim Reaper, is one of the 15 greatest basketball players of all time in my opinion, and he very well could have been in the GOAT conversation, but as someone I look up to has said many times, that's just a theory. A sports theory. And cut.